So in Dragon City, there have been rumors and assumptions about how heroic races work for a very long time. And this current heroic race is not really a great example because I believe that they've accidentally given a lot of players bot enemies, because you can see our opponents here are just, well, not logging in, and Tasmaniac just logged in once and never again. But mainly I wanted to go through heroic races as a whole because tons of people believe that the more active you are in heroic races, the harder the opponents are going to be every race, and this is going to be a pretty much guaranteed thing. And so players were saying, should I not log in for the high Ashwing race so that we can make the high corrupted time race that's upcoming easier? There's a reason why I don't think that that's actually a very good idea, and it's mainly because I just don't believe that it will help you. And so the way that I'm going to sort of explain my reasoning for this is because if we look at every single heroic race that I have visual evidence for when I won the race or either won the dragon, we can see what our rough results were and what our enemies were like when we were logging in for these races. Because I mentioned it before, but I have won every single heroic race, or at least gotten the dragons for every single heroic race since I started playing this game again. Because this is a very, very old account, but I didn't log in for many, many years, and then my first heroic race that happened when I came back was for High Sunbringer. And so since then, we have gotten the dragon in every single heroic race since. That includes the High Occult Titan Marathon also. And so since we've got High Corrupted Time coming in a heroic marathon, people are really itching to get this dragon, so they're obviously looking to do whatever they can to increase their chance of getting this dragon. And I hear people say all the time, if they don't log in, then the enemies are going to be super duper easy, and if you do log in for this race, all the enemies are going to be really, really difficult. It's just not true from my experience in this game. And so I wanted to go through every single one of these screenshots because this shows you every single heroic race that I have gotten the dragon from, which is all of them since I started playing. The very first race, there is another misconception that in the very first heroic race that you ever play, you are guaranteed to get bot opponents. That is not true. I think specifically what it actually is that if your account is brand new and it is your first ever heroic race, then you will typically get bot opponents. So that would be opponents such as in the case of this current race, where these enemies are quite obviously bots. Like they're just not logging in, or they're players that are completely inactive and it's given them to us. If it is a brand new account and it is their first ever heroic race, then usually you will see a heroic race like this with these opponents. But in this case, I'd never played a heroic race before, never logged in during a heroic race, but it seems that simply because my account was just an old account, it was only level 30 when I came back, but you can see that the enemies in this one, we had a lap 12 guy, a lap 5 guy, all the others might have been bots, but we at least had a guy that was on lap 12, which is not very active, it's not super active, but it certainly wasn't a free race like people claim for your first ever heroic race. So I simply do not believe this first misconception, I guess, purely because it didn't happen for me. My first ever race, I actually had to play this race properly. I think I got to lap 16 the first time ever, which was fine considering that I was, you know, in work 5 days a week, and it's like 12 hours a day basically of work including travel. So despite that, we still got to lap 16, which is very doable. But that was my first ever race. Then we've got my second ever race, which was pretty much nearly identical in terms of the position 2 player, and it was for High 7. And so you'll see that the other enemies typically seem to be logging in, so they're not like all lap 1 bots. But we still had a guy at lap 12 for the second race. So pretty much my first race and my second race were identical. So then that was 2 races in a row where, you know, it was pretty much exactly the same after logging in. Then we got my third race. And this time the opponent actually did get qualified and they got to lap 15. But you can see we made it all the way up to lap 18 at the very least. I think that's where we ended. And so This time they were still somewhat active, but they didn't go beyond lap 15 or anything like that. They just made it to the guaranteed dragon. But I guess these were sort of active, a little bit more active than before. Nothing crazy though, because I saw so many people claiming to me when I first started playing this game again, that if you log in for a heroic race and like you get the dragon, your opponents next time are going to get to like lap 20 every single time. It's not true. It's just simply put, not true. So then after the high treasure race, of course, we've got high 5, and then again, made it to lap 18. Next guy made it to lap 15, but that was with like 2 days left. I believe he stayed on lap 15, either 15, 16. I can't remember if we made it to 19. I think we might have, but still, the guy was not going crazy laps. It was pretty much identical to the previous race, but nothing crazy in that one either. So again, nothing. It's not like the enemy suddenly super powered up or anything like that. Next up, we got high heroic, and this one we went back to lap 12. So it's same as like 3 races ago with a bunch of enemies that aren't actually that active. Because I would say that for heroic races, lap 15 plus is quite active. Anything below that is really not that difficult to reach, even if you are like super busy, unless you are missing like entire days from the race. Then remember, these are the old races as well. They're not the crazy timers that we've got at the moment. So this was, you know, pretty reasonable, but they weren't active. Next race, high nest, exactly the same thing, lap 12. They're not even getting, well, they're qualified, but they're not even getting the dragons in these races. Like, they're not making it to lap 15. They're not getting the heroics. They're not bots, but they're also not very active. After that, we got another one with 1 day left. We got to lap 18. The other guy, I think he stayed on lap 14. He might have made it to 15 just. But again, they're barely getting to lap 15 to unlock the dragons still. Then we've got next one where we ended, and this was the Destiny race, and I was incredibly busy during this, and this was with 4 days left to go. I don't believe that the people on the leaderboard really gained too many more laps after this. They really didn't. And I stuck about 20-ish by the end of this one. But the enemies really weren't playing that much either. But of course, High Destiny's race was very different to all the others, so that's sort of an exception case anyway. Next race, well, we got High Occult Titan is what we've got for the Heroic Marathon. And this one is really one that I wanted to use as an example. Because despite the fact that I have logged in for every single race, gotten every single race dragon, and won like 95% of the races I've been in, we still got an incredibly inactive leaderboard for Heroic Marathon. I guess what my point is that rather than the enemies really being decided by how active you are, seems to actually just come down to randomness. Like, if you get picked out in a set of people and they're somewhat active, but then one of them just gems to crazy, it's just RNG at the end of the day. Like, this heroic race was absolutely free, because this marathon is easier than the regular races, and these players didn't even qualify. They didn't even qualify in this one to get a free High Occult Titan, potentially. They didn't even bother. So this one, since it is a marathon, and the next marathon for High Corrupted Time, of course, will be coming up. This is one in particular that I really want to show you. I don't think you not logging in for one race is going to make any difference. I've seen tons of people try it before, and they seem to just get either the same opponents that I do, or even worse opponents. But again, I think that that's just randomly generated, and they just get screwed over by RNG sometimes. I think people don't want to accept that there's not really a whole lot that they can do to change their opponents in this game, or if not logging in for 1 or 2 races does make a difference, it doesn't make a substantial enough difference, really. And I still think picking up every heroic is worth it, personally. Then we had High Scale, which is one where I didn't actually win because there was no reason to, because we unlocked the dragon, so I just stopped logging in completely on lap 16, and that's fine. Guy stayed on lap 16 as well, so we pretty much got to the same lap. So they were a little bit more active than they had been before, but pretty much more or less the same. Lap 15 and 16, it's not a massive difference. Then we get High Siren, where you'll see that we literally just got players lap 8 max. So why did I get given a heroic race so free? I don't know. random. It's completely random at times. Like, just because you log in a lot, you are not guaranteed a difficult race next time. Next up, we have Seismic, where the opponents finish lap 12 max. So this is like, just think about this screenshot right here with high Seismic, and we could literally go up and we could compare this to like the second race ever, and they are pretty much the same. So even though I've won that many races in a row and come up, doesn't matter. It is still the same old thing. Lap 12 max is what they got to, and then we had this one for Heinekria, which the opponents did actually log in, but that is purely because we've got the 500 orbs of Heinekria available. So of course players were going to try and push for lap 18 if they could. Of course we pushed to lap 18 also. So this one we actually had a player that wanted to go for the same rewards that we did. So they did actually log in for the Heinekria race. But overall, I guess my point is just that rather than believing all of these conspiracy theories about these little, little things that will make your opponents really, really difficult next race, or they'll make them incredibly easy, I've never seen any evidence to suggest missing just a single race is going to make any difference. A single race, I don't think does anything. Maybe like 5 in a row or something. If you really just do not ever log in, I could potentially see that being the case. But, if you're going to say if missing one heroic race is going to make the difference, I just don't think it will. So, while this heroic race is ongoing, I thought I'd better go through that. Again, those image files, they're not all right at the end of the race, but they give you a very good idea of how my experience has been with heroic races so far. I did miss quite a few between this point, and that's purely because I didn't record the end of the heroic race, so I have no memory of what they were like. But trust me when I say that most of them tended to look like this, which is like, I'd get to lap 15 to 18, the enemies would get to lap 12 usually. It's normally what happens is players get to lap 11 in a regular race, and they get really, really bored, and then they just stop logging in. That tends to be what I see. Of course, this current race is just, well, they've obviously given us bots by accident, but on top of that, at the same time, this race is more difficult than the races before because we've got changes to all of the timers. I'm on lap 10 at the moment, which I think is still on pace for us getting to lap 18, but of course we're going to have to keep logging in. And I'm still on lap 10:03 despite the fact that I did actually miss like 14 hours of reset logging in yesterday, and I will miss some more over a couple of days, but we still should be able to make it if we really want to make it. Question is whether we're willing to spend the gems really, but I guess I know that at one point Social Point did say that it's supposed to work like the less active you are in races, the less active your opponents are going to be to make it sort of fair, but I've also seen so much of people saying the more active you are in races, the more active your enemies are going to be. And from those screenshots, it just doesn't seem true. Unless these players are like, they'll play one race and then instantly they're going to not log in the time after, which I guess is possible. But what, has that happened 10 races in a row? I just don't believe it personally, but anyway, I wanted to at least go through that today because there's so many rumors and just completely out of nowhere assumptions about heroic races that people just lap up and believe. My stance is that I think you should log in and do this race, especially if you're someone that has a completely free leaderboard because, well, you're going to get a free heroic for basically doing nothing, and I don't think it's going to make a huge difference to your high corrupted time race, honestly. Especially if it ends up like my high occult titan race, and you just get players that don't even qualify for it. Like, that would be great, right? And you'd expect people during the marathons to be going absolutely crazy, but it is not guaranteed just because you are active during other heroic races. So I don't think it's worth missing out on a free heroic just because you assume that it's going to be a harder race next time. I don't think it's true. But anyway, for now, I appreciate you listening to my mini ramblings here. Good luck if you are taking part in this heroic race. If you're not and you're just taking a break or don't care enough, that's fair enough. But I've not missed a heroic yet, and I don't really want to just because I'll feel like I've failed in some capacity. But, it's a nice looking heroic as well. I like High Ass Wing.